Hi everyone, this is Dan and this is Stump number 2 by Nathan Rosario. So I did Stump number 1, I think about a couple months ago. And even though I got both of the books at the same time, I kind of wanted to wait for a bit before I reviewed Stump number 2. Just because I did read it immediately after Stump number 1, and just being honest, I didn't really like it too much. And I kind of wanted to wait for a little bit, kind of sit on it, then reread it, and kind of see how I feel with the second rereading. And with the second rereading, I now find Stump number 2 to be okay. That's not necessarily a diss on the effort that Nathan Rosario has done here. It's just my personal sort of feeling about this story to a degree. But anyway, let's just get into this book right here. So last we left off, Stump had his sort of initial adventure in this world, sort of running into this robot right here, as well as taking on some random aliens and some other subplots and whatnot. And I think what sort of my first initial problem that I have with Stump number 2 is that I find the opening to Stump number 2 to be a little bit chaotic and a little bit I guess to me, like, the actions of the protagonist Stump here are kind of unlikable in this issue right here. And the other big problem with Stump number 2, and again, I'm just going to jump ahead here. He does this live cam thing again, which, again, I hated in the first issue. And even though it's only one page of it, I still hate it again. It dates this comic greatly. So you end up with the same problem that 90s comics have, where they just use a bunch of references to what's going on in the 90s specifically, or what is popular at the time. And then if you come back and reread them, you're going to be like, ugh, this is really old. But, you know, you don't really have that problem to that degree with a lot of 80s and 70s comics, because they tend to use a more classic feel and try to hold off on the references, right? But again, this one page doesn't kill the book necessarily. I think what bugs me about this is that in the early issue here, so him and Blinker end up chasing after this Keystar worm, which supposedly they're supposed to be allies with, even though it's this massive monster of a worm. And Stump's initial approach is to attack it without any warning. And in general, Stump's actions in the early issues here just kind of makes him come across as like this uncaring doofus. And, you know, later on, he completely does a 180 where he gets more heroic qualities. But just the initial pages here kind of make him come off. And it's also a combination of the art, too. Like, Nathan Rosario only really draws Stump having, like, sort of the same facial expression through a lot of this. And I know the model is based off of, I forget if it's like Matt Hughes or whatever the MMA fighter is. But I think for Nathan, I think it's time to kind of like start to develop Stump into being something separate than what you based him off of, and really grow the character more, both visually and from the perspective of what really defines his character. I think what really defines his character, and I'm going to jump ahead here, and I'm kind of moving pretty quickly here, but what really defines the character is the heroic acts of Stump in the halfway part of this story right here. More so than the initial couple pages, which are kind of a slog to get through. And honestly, I feel like Stump I don't know, there's something about the first couple pages of this book that just feel like it just flounders for a little bit. And then it kind of finds its feet halfway through, and you get into the story at that point. But anyway, he ends up taking a bunch of oddball jobs after he helps Blinker the robot apparently hack into the world via a power outlet, which is somewhat unbelievable, and also somewhat takes way too long to explain why this character is out of the story. But that's just kind of me right here. And then you get this weird thing where there's this animal that's kind of under the ground, and it's kind of left as a subplot. Again, I think Nathan Rosario needs to like lay off on the subplots. At this point, like, people are going to, especially for how long it's taking for each of these books to come out, people are going to start forgetting that these subplots exist. So I would like tone it down a little bit, and also remember that every single book could be someone's first book, right? So initially, when you start off, especially right here, like we're kind of left as if this is all one running book between issue number 1 and issue number 2. The reality is it's going to be a gap of what, like a year or two in between each book, just being realistic. So stop for a little bit, have a little reminder of where you are in the story for new readers, and then continue on, right? I know it's a pain in the butt and you just want to keep, doing whatever your story is, but keep in mind that there are a lot of people who may pick this up as their first book, and they may not have access to the first one, right? So always treat every single issue like it's the first issue that someone could potentially pick up. Even if you don't want to do necessarily a story and you want to do like the Japanese thing where you have like a catch-up page or something, just consider that, because right now I feel like when I get through half of this story, it's almost like a mess, and I'm almost trying to like rediscover what Stump is when I'm getting into it. But anyway, Stump ends up taking a job basically cleaning out this warehouse, and in the middle of cleaning out this warehouse, he runs into an urn. The urn ends up basically unleashing this, I don't know if it's like Chinese or Asian animal that is unleashed into the world. Basically looks almost like a baboon crossed with a tiger. And he ends up getting transformed to this this sort of dream Chinese world where this girl attacks her, and then she proceeds to do a massive exposition dump on what the creature is, their history, etc. And it's basically like Asian Chinese mythology that's going on here. And it's very, very jarring, especially for this issue right here. And the reason why it's jarring is that we just came back from like, flying with a, giant robot, right? And then facing some alien monster, and then some more like alien monster subplots and hacking into the world government with an electrical outlet, to all of a sudden now we're in like a Chinese fairy tale or an Asian fairy tale, right? Whatever this happens to be. And it's really, really weird. Now, to be fair to Nathan Rosario, the story is actually pretty decent, and it's actually pretty fun, and I don't necessarily, on just the merits of this story with Stump engaging with it, I think it's actually done pretty well. I just think it's I would say just the theme and the genre of this whole book is just all over the place. And really, this would have done way better if it was just, this one story was just a single issue, like 24-page story. If he would have tightened it up and just closed it off as like its own little sub-story, I think it would have been infinitely better rather than part of this massive book. I think probably, if I had to make a wager, is Nathan probably had like a bunch of different ideas that he was coming up with while he was drawing and writing stuff, and he ended up just going on the one that probably felt like the hottest while he was in the middle of doing it. And I think the problem with that is that this story right here of this mangrel monster, and I'm sure it could like probably tie into like other stories in the future, such as the beauty of having now his own franchise here that he can continue on with and grow with, right? It would have been better as a standalone story by itself somewhere down the line, because it feels so out of left field compared to everything else that we've developed so far, which is really like aliens, and superhumans and superheroes on Earth and whatnot, right? Everything kind of had like a weird Superman Green Lantern feel. And now all of a sudden we have like this Chinese mythology sort of like I don't know, like Mulan in a way, right? And it's really, really odd. So that he ends up getting out of this dream world and chasing after this monster all up and down Illinois, and ends up getting into a fight and attempts to jump this Chinese monster into the stratosphere, which is like a weird fusion of fighting mythology with like space stuff, I guess. I don't know. And art, by the way, is fantastic. I really do like Nathan Rosario's art, though I do think he should put more effort into his backgrounds. Some of his backgrounds just feel kind of sparse, and he's just kind of using like single color or just, very light rendering here and there. And I think, again, the setting is the Midwest, so, it's not like there's a lot to draw here. but in other settings that he may potentially have, he may find himself wanting to put a little bit more time in the backgrounds compared to what he's been doing so far. So anyway, he gets a little assist from his robot friend, and he's able to basically trap the monster, or I guess banish the monster back into a vase, allegedly, which for those of you who have read the rest of this, you will know. And then they end up flying over to Germany after a bunch of more glamour shots right here. Nathan, I think draws these single pages just a little too much. I think there were plenty of these back in Stump number 1, and I guess unless his goal is to get women to buy this comic book a lot, it's starting to get to me a little bit repetitive. Yeah, we get it. Stump is a short dude who's kind of ripped like a bull. Okay, cool. This entire page could have been service to push the story forward right here, or just do in general more, to me personally. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting. I think if you wanted something very wacky and out of left field, or you wanted to be surprised, or you're one of those readers who you need to see something different or unique in order to hold your interest, and it's not necessarily about the execution that you care about, I think Stump number 2 is actually a pretty good book. Because I definitely didn't see any of the shit that Nathan Rosario was going to do in this book ahead of time. It totally, surprised the hell out of me. For me personally, I don't know. I kind of felt this was just a bit of a mess, and I really feel like at this point Nathan really needs to consider an editor, just someone to kind of organize his thoughts and focus him on what is the actual story, and not necessarily say no to his ideas, because Nathan has a lot of great ideas. A lot of writers, independent writers and artists out there have a lot of great ideas, but instead kind of realize that there's a time and a place for certain stories, and it needs to be kind of considered in the bigger picture of where you want to go with the character, right? So anyway, do I recommend it? If you like Stump 1, I mean, definitely pick up Stump number 2, just because, the character hasn't drastically changed. I just think there was a little bit of slip-ups in the beginning of this book. And overall, it's still pretty cool. If you like Nathan Rosario's art, definitely pick it up. But I would say, it's not as good as Stump number as the first issue. And I'm hoping that Nathan kind of gets some people to help him out on the third issue to sort of focus the story a little better in my eyes. But anyhow, that's the review, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Stump number 2 by Nathan Rosario, leave it down below. And I will see you next time.